Hi there, this is number 3 podcast on addiction, and today is about trauma. Now, I've just done the one on abuse, and you can be traumatized from the abuse, obviously, but you can actually also have trauma. And trauma is just something that happens to us, and we have a reaction which is traumatic. The whole thing is too traumatic for us, and we can't cope. And this can be part of the abuse, but it can also be other things. For example, if you find out your mum's got cancer and she's going to die, you'll have this traumatic reaction, and as she's dying and when she dies and having to go through the whole thing will be really traumatizing. When my husband died, his death was terrible. It wasn't one of those pleasant deaths, and my son and I were completely traumatized by the experience because we were the last two people there. And it took us a lot of time to get over the trauma of the way he died. The same thing can happen to you. You can have a breakup as well. Your marriage can fall apart. You can be estranged from your children. You can lose your job. There's so many things that create trauma in people. You can be in a bank when there's a robbery. You can have a home invasion, and you will have the trauma of that. And that trauma will now set you up for addiction, because as the trauma keeps coming up and the flashbacks, you want to pacify yourself, so you're going to have to find something to do that. And that's where you'll be very vulnerable to addiction. Now, this is not your fault. This is just a response. And I wanted to do this podcast because people just don't put the two of them together. They don't understand that. But if you actually look at it, you can see it. For example, I had a girlfriend, and when her husband died, she just started to drink all the time. And she drank and drank and drank. She just couldn't cope with the trauma of his death. It was nothing to do with abuse. It was nothing to do with a car accident. It was actually his death and his loss. And the grief had so traumatized her that she used alcohol as her addiction. Someone else might overeat. I have another friend, and he landed up eating a lot more at night because it was traumatic. When his wife died, he'd been with her for 4 decades, and when she died, he was actually traumatized by it. And his coping method was to eat it down. He swallowed it down. He stuffed it down because he had no other way to deal with it at that time. As we heal from the trauma, the addiction can lessen. However, the trouble with that is that sometimes as we come into the more calm place and we're healing from the trauma, the addiction's actually set in place. So now we are addicted to smoking or drugs or drinking, or now we are addicted to overeating. The habit has become so strong that it supersedes everything. And even though we're not as traumatized, we still now have the addiction, we have the habit. And I want you to recognize that in yourself, that now you have this habit and this addiction, even though you might have got over the death or the trauma that you suffered from. Anyone who's been traumatized or has an experience and has trauma afterwards in the body will do this on some level. No one is really immune from it. Even taking some numbing kind of tablets to bring your anxiety down or help with your depression, which is actually coming from the trauma, it still means it's actually stuck there. You just found a way to dull it out or numb it out. And these numbing devices are useful at the time, they seem to be, but then they create a whole new monster later because now you have an addiction problem. It's important that you be kind to yourself and understand what's gone on, and don't berate yourself or tell yourself off or think you're weak or pathetic because you're now addicted to certain things. It's just what happened, and life's like that. Life's really tough down here. I find it really hard. And, as much as there are wonderful things in life, the difficult things are super difficult, I think. The best way is, of course, to deal with the trauma. Go and get some counselling, go to a therapist, go and do some rebirthing, go and do some hypnosis, all these things I keep talking about. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about them, but, these are the modalities to release it, because the trauma is actually trapped in the body and sort of hooks in, and once you have it, it's like someone freezes you and paralyzes you. And it can feel like that. Trauma can feel paralyzing because it stops you from being able to do things. And that's why if you've suffered from post-traumatic stress, you will understand when I'm talking about the paralyzing feeling, because you feel like you've been paralyzed by the trauma. and now you have the stress of it. Get help. Help yourself. Do whatever works for you, and then deal also at the same time, if possible, with the addiction. So try and lessen it and substitute it. For example, if you're drinking every second drink, now have water instead, and only allow yourself to have 2 drinks or whatever it is. You need to start being a parent to yourself. You need to start sort of bossing yourself around a bit and telling yourself not to do this. If you're smoking too much, start bringing it down. If you're eating too much, start bringing it down and substitute it with other foods that are going to fill you up and will nourish you. You do still have to do the work. You can't just think it through. You actually physically have to change the habit. They say it takes 21 days to change a habit. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do think it will take a long time, and we'll have like setbacks. So we do quite well, and then something will happen, the trauma comes back up, and then we nurse it with our addiction. And you're not to be mean with yourself. You just say, okay, I had a really bad day, and I know what it is, so I need to go and get rid of the trauma. In the trauma, there's usually a lot of fear in the trauma, I feel. And then you can also do some work on your grief at the loss, if you've lost somebody, and the terror of it. It's terrifying. But when I found out my husband was actually going to die, it was terminal, it was terrifying. It brought up a lot of fear in me as well. I've been with this person for 40 plus decades, and now he's going to die, and I'm going to be on my own. And I hadn't done that for a while, so quite a long time. So it brought up the fear and the terror, and that's part of the trauma. So the abuse one is usually more to do with hurt and emotional pain and anger. And yes, there's fear and terror in abuse. I'm not saying there isn't, but the trauma one seems to be a lot of fear and a lot of terror and being really scared, being petrified. And it locks you up. It actually locks you up. Therefore, if you're doing release work, go and see if you can let go of the fear and the terror and the loss and the paralysing feeling of being scared. Let go of those ones. They're your major emotions. You can have some anger because of the trauma. You can be angry the person died, which sounds ridiculous, but it's how people feel. You can be angry about your divorce. You can be angry about being estranged from your children or your friends. You can be angry about losing your job. These are also emotions that come up. And I think you will, if you're listening to these podcasts, you're pretty switched on, so you know yourself quite well. So you will actually be able to identify what the feelings are that you need to work on to release the trauma, because the feelings are caught in the trauma. They get caught in. And when you let go of the fear and keep letting go of the fear and letting go of the trauma can go too, because they're linked together. Those emotions are linked together. I'm really sorry if you've suffered from trauma and now even have PTSD, because it's crippling and it's paralysing and it just wrecks your life. It really does. And so that's why I'm doing all these podcasts, to reach out to you, because I've been on certain paths and I know how rocky the road is, and I know how lonely it is. It's really lonely dealing with this stuff, because a lot of people don't want to talk about it, and trauma particularly, people are very uncomfortable with trauma too. So if you start telling them how it was and what was going on, they'll recoil as well. It's like they can't cope, so you have to be quiet. Help yourself, do all your modalities, like I keep saying. Get help professionally if you need it. Asking for help is not weakness. Asking for help is strength. When we ask for help, it's stronger, because we don't have to do it alone. Just like the abuse, we did it alone quite a lot. Now we don't, and now with the trauma, we might have been on our own or didn't have any help at that stage, but now we can get help so we can get well. The addiction you're having and the link with the trauma, I think you'll start to see it more and more now. The trauma can also be triggered, just like the abuse. So you might watch something on TV and then it's a similar event, and then that night you can't sleep. Just have a look around in your world and see what happens, or you'll end up in something which gives you the flashbacks from the trauma, and then you're overeating, or you smoked too much today and having too many drinks. You don't have to dumb it down, you just have to deal with it. It's a different way of doing your life than spending your life trying to push it down, medicate yourself. You don't have to do that. You can release the feelings, let them go and do some work on that, and also release the trauma. Now, trauma can be tapped out. I've done a lot of work on releasing trauma, so you can have physical trauma, emotional, mental, and psychological trauma. That's what I feel. It's those four. So if you do the tapping, you can cover all of them, do them one by one. You might know what it is, what sort of trauma it was, and the trauma gets lodged in the aura, so it'll be lodged in the different chakras. I would just cover everything personally because I think it's a good thing to do, and do a lot of work at letting the trauma go that's hooked and locked in your body. I hope these podcasts help you. I hope you can release your trauma and let it go. Because once it leaves the body, because it's just an energy, right? It's an event and an energy in a thought form. It's attached to your thought. Once you let it go and release it and let it go, then you won't need the addiction. And your addiction will lessen. And to the point where you might actually give up smoking or only drink socially now or lose weight because of the eating thing. It's all up to you. If you haven't done well with all of this, you need to be really nurturing to yourself because you're dealing with heaps of stuff and other people were walking around feeling like Miss Sunshine, but you weren't. And you still got to work and you got the kids to school and you still got a meal on the table and you felt like total crap. So you just stop being mean to yourself and hard to yourself. You just tell yourself, okay, I'm still here, I survived, but now I need to do some work at getting better and actually healing from it. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to heal from the trauma. And we can, but we have to let it go. So I'll leave you with that today. And I'm wishing you lots of good luck with it. And I'm sending you lots of love and lots of healing and lots of light because you're a survivor, baby. And we're still here. Now we just have to get better. Love to you.